Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome to The Pleasure Zone, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we're having a fun day, working with our own brains, getting things on track. It's all good. So for those of you who've never listened to this show before and you just walked in because you're like, hey, that's a cool title of a podcast, The Pleasure Zone. I wonder if they're going to talk about pleasure. Yep, we are going to talk about pleasure. And we're going to talk about brains actually today, because our brains have like the greatest pleasure zone of all times. It's actually a pleasure center called the nucleus accumbens, and it's like the sexiest part of our bodies. I know that all of you were like, the sexiest part of our bodies should be like the penis and the clitoris, because they have like so many nerve endings. But without the nucleus accumbens, it wouldn't matter. So it's part of what releases all that great dopamine when you're getting turned on and you're like, your body feels good. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about, that fun part of our brains tonight. And I love that. So what the title is of this show is Why Don't I Want Sex with My Lover? And the reason I put this title out there is because for so many people, they have gone through so many things. They might have gone through therapy. They might have gone through hormone testing. They might have gone through a seance and even gone through, and gotten like the demons removed from their bodies. Like, you never know. You might have literally done everything in the world. And you're like, but I love my lover. I love my spouse. I love my boyfriend or girlfriend or friend or whatever. You love them, but you're not feeling turned on by them, and you feel bad about it. And why is that? And like, if you're sitting there wondering, like, what's wrong with me that I am not turned on by my own lover? Well, tonight we're going to find out that it's that special part of your brain that could be part of the contributing factor to why you're not turned on by your lover, even though you love them, right? So sometimes the factor is that there's some, you could love them, but you're resenting them in the moment, and there's some unhealed issues. We'll get into some details on that for sure, about how that all affects your brain as well. So for those of you who are listening and have never heard of me before, my name is Milica Jelenic, and I work with bodies. One of my favorite things to do in the world is work with bodies to have them have more pleasure and more ease. And I do that through different modalities, whether it's through my holistic health practice or through sex and intimacy coaching, or a combination of both. My target is to get you to have a much happier life. And the main reason why I do this work is because I didn't have such a freaking happy life growing up. I grew up with a lot of like different traumas, and even into my 20s, I had some pretty intense traumas. So I looked for solutions, and what I bring to the table are solutions that I have not only studied, but the ones that I've taken into action and that I feel worked for me are the ones that I also bring to the table. So I do love doing research as well, and just offering you information, which is a lot of fun. A lot of my shows will also offer you different things like tools and different methods so that you can actually start to begin to heal yourself. Now, I don't always recommend that you do all of the process on your own. I didn't do all of the process on my own, and I still don't to this day. I have my coaches, I have my dear friends, I have my people that I can rely on. And I also have a lot of curiosity, so I'll find resources. If I don't happen to have a resource that I need, I will find a resource. So my thing is that if you're listening to this show, you're not only a pleasure seeker, you're also a seeker for something greater in your life. And probably if you read the description of this show, you were probably thinking, that's me. And I really want to know, why don't I want to have sex with my lover? Because I actually love my lover and I don't have any good reason for that. So what are my reasons? Oh, and I'm sure that for some of you that you're looking around at some of your reasons and you're wondering, what are some of my reasons for not feeling attracted to my lover? Could it be that I don't love them anymore? Like maybe I don't love them. Maybe I don't know how I feel about them. That's possible. The truth is, it's bigger and broader than that. It involves internal stressors and external stressors. So let's talk about some things first that could be some internal stressors. So some internal stressors are things that emotionally maybe we haven't dealt with. Like if you are constantly concerned about, say, loved ones who are sick or dying in hospital or something, and all your thoughts and all your energy is directed towards somebody who's very ill. It can even be a caregiver for somebody who's older or somebody even who's younger. It doesn't really matter the age of the person. It's that you're expending your energy on someone else all the time. And that's not a bad thing. It's probably what you need to do to help yourself feel good about, your choices and who you're with too. Like if you're looking after somebody because you love them, that's fantastic. It also does expend a lot of energy and it can be highly stressful. And being in an environment where you're always looking after people who are sick can also be really tough as well. So people who are in positions like nurses and doctors, they're in highly stressful positions. And if you're working even at a job where you're underpaid and overworked, that burnout can also create an issue. So burnout and stress are different. We've talked about that on this show before. Burnout is overworked, underappreciated, and stressed is where you're just on high all the time, like highly high. And stress can be the antidote to burnout. So so that was on another show. So feel free to go back and listen to that. So what are some other internal stressors? So when I look at my own personal life, I've had internal stressors of things where maybe I hadn't resolved some emotional issues that were even from childhood. So if I go all the way back into my childhood, some of my internal stressors that I had growing up were poverty. They were also poverty stumped me because that covered a lot of the basis. But so poverty, abandonment was another big issue. I always felt very abandoned. And I wasn't getting, and it wasn't the fault of my parents. They didn't really know. They weren't really able to fulfill my love language because people weren't using those words at the time. And a lot of parents still to this day don't really look at love languages as something that you also use with your children, use with your friends. It's not just about your lover. So knowing people's love languages is super helpful in being able to deliver their love language. Now, my parents were very mixed on my parents didn't live together either. So I was in a divorced home. So that was stressful for me. I was that kid who was at the doctor, like every time I'd go to visit my dad, I would need to go to the doctor. And I would have stomach cramps all the time. My stomach hurt, not just from the food I was eating that I really didn't want to eat, but I also was like, there was no choice. It was that or you don't eat. And so that was hard on my guts. And so physically it wasn't conducive, but also I could feel as like a super empathic kid, I could feel my dad's stress and I could feel all of this stuff he was going through and his sadness. I could feel my mom's as well, but my mom was able to find outlets and she was much more functional. She worked a hell of a lot more and she was a lot more functional. So she found sources and she found people and she found a support system too that worked. And my dad had a support system per se, but my dad has a really great way of creating, what's the word for tension? He creates a lot of tension, so it can be hard to be around. It's one of his massive talents in this life. He laughs at me when I tell him stuff like that. When I'm like, Dad, your talent is actually creating stress. So there you go. So being in that though as a kid was really hard on my body, right? And so when I look all the way back, when those stressors reignite, or when I recognize them in my life now, if something, for example, reminds me of abandonment, then that stressor comes up and I have to be really present with it, or it can literally take over my internal environment, where I can be like, oh, okay, so I'm going to give you a comparison. So in my 20s, I dated somebody, and if they, and I feel for them. So if you're out there, Nick, I apologize for all of it. I apologize for all of it if you're listening. So I was not very kind to that particular boyfriend, and a lot of it was so much unresolved stuff with my own family and my own childhood, that I was feeling like everything, every fight would lead to, I thought every fight led to abandonment. I thought every fight led to breakups. I thought like, and I only way I knew how to relate to people was from what I had learned from my parents. And one was run away, which is what my mom would do, is do the runaway. And what my dad would do would be aggressively, at times very vocal. And so they had exactly the opposite styles of dealing with things. And I happened to take on both, which was tricky. For anybody to be in a relationship with me was tricky. I'm a lot better now, but I still can see those things niggle up. So those internal stressors, they could be really old. They don't even have to be current stressors. They could be stressors that you've had in your life forever. And what those stressors do is they actually affect a part of your brain that's your pleasure center, called your nucleus accumbens. And when you're under that kind of level of stress, the dopamine does not release from your, so dopamine, not that it just releases from your nucleus accumbens, but it's a contributor. So when it starts to release, then, you know, if it doesn't release, then you're going to feel quite depressed. You're going to feel kind of sad. You're not going to have all these kicks that help you feel good. For those of you who want to know about things like dopamine and serotonin and like those happy hormones, I actually have a course on my Teachable platform that you can find through my website, milicajelenic.com. Under my classes, if you scroll through there, if you click on the finding out more information about the classes, you'll be taken directly to find out about the Happiness Hormones Club that I created with my mom in the spring. I love it. I think it's a great course. Gives you all kinds of things in order to increase all your 4 happy hormones. So dopamine is one of them. So back to the nucleus accumbens. So we have internal and external stressors that affect the nucleus accumbens. And we know that there's actually been research done. I don't have the name of the researchers offhand, but I remember hearing about a particular research study that was, there were different environments and then different stimuli to specific stimulation to the nucleus accumbens. I don't know if they did this in people or if they did it in rats, but let's just go with, I'm going to just give you scenarios and tell it as a story rather than as a research paper, because I don't want to get the information. I don't want to give you the incorrect information, but I want to give you the gist of it. So what we know is, so far from research though, is that there are 2 parts of the nucleus accumbens, the upper and the lower. And the upper part, normally when stimulated under like normal circumstances, if you stimulate the upper part of the nucleus accumbens, you're going to have a lot of happy, motivation oriented feelings, feel really good about things, and even feel a little turned on. And if you stimulate the lower part of the nucleus accumbens, which in a normal environment with no other stimuli is going to actually create a sort of a sad or a low feeling. So then if you change the environments, you can change environments up where you could be say you're in a really, really peaceful environment, and it's loving and kind and contributive to your body and things that you really love, smells that you like, environment that you like, the lighting that you like, the sounds that you like. And then you have the lower part of your nucleus accumbens stimulated. So that's the part that you should normally be turned off by. If you have that part stimulated under those grand circumstances, you'll actually be turned on. And so we'll talk a little bit more about some other effects of stimulating the nucleus accumbens, but first we're going to go to break. So you're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email becomeahost@inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we're talking about your sexy, sexy brain and why is it that you might not be turned on by your lover. I know I went into a bit of a story earlier about internal stressors, and that is because they have a major factor in why you might be not turned on by your lover. So taking stock and starting to understand what some of your internal stressors are. Now, I mentioned internal stressors of my own from my past, and that might trigger some reminders for you, some that you might still have lying around if you've never really looked at them. Or, some other stressors could even include things like poverty is definitely a stressor. So even it could be a current thing where you might be stressed about finances, you might be stressed, which is really high for people these days. And it's a funny thing because I think it's also a naturally protective thing in our bodies, that if we aren't turned on, say, for example, if we're stressed about finances and we're not feeling financially stable and our body won't get turned on, then our natural inclination to have sex, which could create, a child, which could increase the debt, increase the stress, is lowered. So our desire to actually have sex is lowered because the natural process of that is, instinctively is usually for reproduction. It is also in humans, luckily, we're lucky that it can also just be for pleasure, because we're lucky that way. And yay, clitoris is for pleasure. But the true drive will start to diminish a lot when there are a lot of internal and external stressors. So internal stressors being all the things that we're feeling, but they can also be things that are physically going on inside your body. Like there can be, if you are experiencing things like heart disease, or even if you're having a really bad infection or inflammation somewhere, or pain inside your body, your chances of being turned on are much lower. Now, here's the weird thing, right? If you're feeling really sick and you go somewhere to be looked after, and you're in a calm environment, and you're in like a space where you like the smells and you like the surroundings, and you can relax, what happens? Your body starts to calm down, right? And then it can start to release some dopamine into your nucleus accumbens. So it's not that your nucleus accumbens releases it, it's that it's released into it. So so then you start to feel good, right? So that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And yes, so the dopamine is released into the nucleus accumbens because it's like part of the reward system. And so if you're in a place where you're feeling like pretty good, and you're home, like okay, so you're not feeling well, you're feeling sick, but you're in an environment where you're feeling looked after, and things are taken care of. Like the other day, I was having some really interesting things going on with my body, and it was like I was like kind of barking demands because I needed my environment to be really calm for me. So I was like, can you do the dishes? Can you put the food away? Can you do this? Because I actually was experiencing such a level of pain. But I also know, the crazy thing is I know enough that I know what's actually going to calm down my body to be able to heal as well. So I know what needed to be done in my environment. And I was like, okay, I need this smell in the house to change, do this. I need this to change, do this. I need the lighting to change, do this. So I could, at least as much as I couldn't do much in terms of movement, I could give the commands and give the orders that I knew was going to assist my body, right? So some certain environmental factors can be highly stressful, and when your body is experiencing pain, these things can be even more stressful. Like bright lights and loud noises can be incredibly stressful when your body is when your body is not feeling well. So we talked about before break, we talked about 3 different scenarios of how, if your nucleus accumbens is being stimulated in the upper part, the lower part, and then the lower part being stimulated in a happy environment, that it can actually start to shift, and that you can become turned on if the environment starts to shift, right? So sometimes those external environmental factors can start to calm down the internal situation as well that's going on. Now, one of the interesting things about this story is that if you could go into the same environment, and if you had your upper part, I'm just trying to get all these combinations out for you. So if you had the upper part of your nucleus accumbens stimulated, and you walked into, and so that's supposed to be the happy space, right, where everything feels good and it's like a turn on. But if you have that stimulated, and you walk into a highly obnoxious space where loud noises, lights flashing, colors, crazy things going off, smells that are really intrusive, and all of your senses are being overly stimulated, it doesn't matter how much your upper part of your nucleus accumbens is being stimulated, you are not going to be able to get aroused. So I hope that story kind of helps give an understanding that there are times when no matter what you're trying to do in your brain, and even if your brain was manually stimulated, that if the environment is highly stressful for you, until you leave the environment, nothing is going to change. Yeah, so you're going to be under duress, and duress does not lead to turn on. It doesn't lead to happiness either. So it's always good to check your environment. Now, those environment things could be the loud noises. Like if you live with somebody who yells all the time, that's the equivalent of having like obnoxious loud noises going off, right? You know, I don't like the smell of cigarettes. So if I lived with somebody who smoked in the house all the time, my husband doesn't smoke at all, but the smell of cigarettes would be so like obnoxious for me that I would have a hard time being around it. Doesn't help that I'm highly allergic to it. So there are certain things that could just throw you off, right? Where no matter how you were feeling 5 minutes before, you could have been turned on, and you walk into this environment that is so obnoxious, you will be so turned off so fast. Yeah. So I bring this up because I've had people say, well, I've tried everything with my partner. Like we went on holidays and that just, we even had like quiet time to ourselves. And I'm like, okay, well, you might have had quiet time to yourselves, but internally, did you still have all these worries? And were some of the worries like, sometimes people like go away on holiday to try and resolve an issue. Say there was cheating in the marriage or something, and it's like the couple is like, oh, we're going to go away and we're going to try and reconcile this, and we're just going to spend time together, and that's going to cure this. But the thing is, you're heading off on a vacation with mistrust already in as part of the internal environment. You've got anger as part of the internal environment, possible retaliation, like all these emotions that are running in the internal environment, and stresses and all these other things, and possibly like abandonment issues and all this other stuff. So it doesn't matter in that point, really, if those internal things are not resolved. It's like being in that obnoxious space with noises going off, but it's internal. And those noises are going off inside of you the whole time. So that nucleus accumbens of yours is going to be, that lower part is going to be on overdrive, where you're not feeling turned on. And even if you tried to turn on at this point, it wouldn't happen. It would be that totally stressful environment. So when you think, well, why can't I get turned on my partner? I want you to first check what's going on inside. Like, what are you actually feeling? When was the last time, what were maybe the last, or not even the last, because maybe the last ones weren't so great. What were your favorite 3 times of having sex with your lover? And what did you feel like? What was your internal environment like? What was your external environment like? So what was the setting? Like, were you in a chalet? Did you have a nice fire going? Was it beautiful? Did you have other certain things that, like the lighting? Did you have no children in your life at the time? Did you have no debt in your life at the time? Like all of these things that we don't think about, it's weird, but they all affect how much we can actually be not only present with our partner, because that's important, but also have your brain present enough to be turned on. So you could try and stimulate somebody's pleasure zones that are the ones you've been thinking about, like the penis, the clitoris, nipples, all things like that. You could absolutely try to do that. But if that person's angry with you, or if you're angry and you're trying to have sex too, you're not going to get turned on. So this is why in all of my shows I talk about, number one thing is communication. And sometimes in order to get to that level of being able to be turned on, you have to allow people to either process their stuff or talk about it in some way, communicate it so that you can get down to the root of what's going on and you can resolve it. So you might think about when, the great sex I've had this last, the 3 great times I've had sex in my life. But I'd also like you to look at the 3 times in your life that you had really crappy sex, and what those environments were like, and what were you feeling internally about what was going on at the time for that as well. this breakdown of how did you feel when you were having great sex and how did you feel when you were having not great sex are going to be really helpful in determining for you what kind of environment you like, what kind of things you need internally, what kind of connection you need to your partner in order to feel turned on, in order for your nucleus accumbens to be working with you, right? So how about you think about that during the commercial break? If you write some things down during the commercial and you're wondering, what do I do with this now? You can always connect with me or come back, listen to the next part of the show, and we'll go through some things that you can do with this list. So you can connect with me through milicajelenic.com, MILICAJELENIC.com. At the bottom of my page, you'll find a book now. So you can click on that link and you can book a 15-minute session with me. I gift the first 15 minutes to see if we're a fit. And we can go from there. So you're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network. And we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we're talking about why am I not interested in having sex with my lover? Why am I not feeling that? And you might have had your hormones checked and they're like, your hormones are normal. You might have gone to a sex therapist, or maybe not. You might have gone to a sex therapist and they might not have considered or thought of talking to you about your internal and external environments and how that's stimulating your nucleus accumbens, but they probably have. So if you've had your hormones checked and that did not make any sense as to why you're turned off, definitely speak with somebody who's either a sex and intimacy coach like myself, or speak with somebody who is a sexologist, or anybody who's in the field of sex and intimacy as a professional. Will be able to give you information about this so that you can get down and understand what is going on. You know, before break, I asked you to think about 3 different scenarios of sex that you really enjoyed, and 3 different scenarios of sex that you really didn't enjoy. And in that sort of self-discovery, you can probably start to see that there are some commonalities in the context of the different things that you like. So context is interesting, because it could be, I'll give you an example. So context would be this would be like, if you are having a shower and your lover knocks on the door and is like, can I come in and join you? And you have all the time in the world, because there's nobody else in the house, and it's good timing for you, and you don't have anywhere to be, and you might say yes. But you could be in the shower and trying to get 4 kids ready for school, trying to get food made, trying to get everything done, and all you need to do is like wash your bits and get going. And your lover's trying to come in and have a shower with you. You might be like, for real, you think now's the time? So you can see that it's both shower incidences, and both are asking for intimacy and possible intimacy in the shower, but the context of the scenario is different, right? So you might have, it's a very different response, which for a lot of people who are in relationship with women in particular, because internal context, we actually have more, as women, as females, I should say, we have more risks involved. So, having babies due to sex is more risky. Having, there are just different things that all fall on extra stressors that females carry that males don't carry. And I don't have any research for intersex on that, but if you happen to be intersex, but you have dominant female genitalia, then you might also have some kind of concern about pregnancy as well. So, but you might have other concerns too about just in general, because there isn't a lot of information out about intersex in general. So that's a whole other side note. But context, let's talk about context. So context is all about the different scenarios, basically, like what's actually going on, what's the context. And it could even be like, being spanked in the bedroom is great, but being spanked in front of your in-laws, not so great. It's just whatever works for you. It depends on what's going on, right? So we begin to look very complicated, especially females look more complicated, and people are like, why are women so complicated? It comes down to the nucleus accumbens. Why we are so complicated is the nucleus accumbens and the way we respond to internal and external environmental situations and stimuli. So just as a recap, because this even though I didn't, I kind of just went through the parts of the brain, and I didn't write this in the description that I was going to be talking about the brain. I wanted to sneak it in there for all my nerds out there that love talking about brains and love talking about all the whys behind stuff. Like, why am I not attracted to my lover? I've tried everything and I don't understand this. So looking at those, let's just recap, those different parts of the brain and the stimuli. So if you stimulate the top part of your nucleus accumbens, it'll get you curious. It'll have you have approach behaviors. It'll get you intrigued and interested. If you have the bottom part of your nucleus accumbens stimulated in a neutral, these are both in neutral environments, then you'll probably feel avoidant. So either approach or avoidant. So top part is approach, bottom part is avoidant. Yeah. And so now we're going to do a recap of, if the bottom nucleus accumbens is stimulated in a safe environment, a super safe environment, that's like actually an environment that's enticing, loving, caring, kind, you'll actually start to feel comfortable again. You might even feel over time aroused somewhat, because there are less stressors. Now, if you are in a super loud, placed in a super loud, stressful environment, even though your top part of your nucleus accumbens is being stimulated, no matter how much they can try and stimulate that top part, which is really supposed to be about getting you curious and approachable, that, even though if you're in an environment that's super stressful, you will not be turned on. You'll actually end up having avoidant behaviors. So you'll actually end up giving results as if your bottom nucleus accumbens is being stimulated. Right. So what this tells us is that essentially that sensation, in our bodies and how we feel, is very context dependent. It depends on the different situations. It depends on the environment, and it depends on internally what's going on as well. It also tells us that essentially anything can turn you on, because if you can have that bottom part of your nucleus accumbens be stimulated, which is supposed to create an avoidant behavior. But if you can have that stimulated and feel approachable in a certain environment, in a more happier, and we know that essentially in the right environment, anything can turn you on. Isn't that the coolest thing, though? So changing up our environment doesn't mean that you need to leave your house and have sex in hotels all the time. I mean, it could mean like cleaning out your room. It could mean organizing things. It could mean that you are having a quiet environment, sending the kids away for a day, but also dealing with your internal environment, where if something's going on and all you're thinking about is how much you resent your partner or you just had a fight, it's going to take your body a while to be able to bring that stimulation back or be okay with it, because you also need to have a level of, well, particularly for female bodies, they need to have a level of trust, so that there's a sense of safety where you're not feeling like you're going to be abandoned or be made pregnant and then somebody takes off on you, that sort of thing. So relationship can have a huge factor on the comfort level as well, and we talked about that last week on the show, so you can go back and listen to that one where we talked about the sexual inhibitors and sexual exciters. And so this is just like a continuation. However, we're talking specifically about the brain and how this works. So it's fascinating stuff. I know there are a lot of different rat studies on the nucleus accumbens. So there are probably, if you're wanting to look up information on that, I'm sure you can go in and find stuff on that. So what can we do to change this stuff? Like if you're really not turned on by your lover. So first of all, we're going to start with those 3 times where, like, if you had sex at least 3 times with your lover and they were good, you probably stuck around hoping for more. But if you never had really good sex with your lover and you stuck around, you might want to ask why that is. Were they kind to you at least? Or like, was there something environmental that was really working for you? Like, do they own a yacht and you just love being on a yacht? Like, what is it? So there could be different scenarios. So it's important in doing some of these self-discoveries to check in with yourself too. And like, what was it about those scenarios that had you turned on? Like, did you trust yourself at the time? Did you trust all your feelings? Did you trust your partner? Like, did you trust that you were safe? Do you trust your body even? Like, so lots of things to consider. All right, so we're just gonna look at a few more things in terms of how we can really get our environment to be conducive to having us be turned on, So external environment, internal environment, what are some of the things that you can start with right away today when we get off the show tonight, that you can just, or whenever you're listening to it, when we get off, or when then you can get off, right? So we're trying to create an environment that you will be able to be stimulated, happy, and evaluate what is it that is going on that isn't working for you, and start to take some steps to change it. Because it's one thing to know what the issue is. It's another thing to start to make some changes, right? So we're going to look at some options for that when we come back. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and I'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email. info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. Today we are talking about your brain. I know you didn't think that it's all about your brain, but your pleasure center is in your brain. So we're talking about your nucleus accumbens today. We're talking all about how different environments and different stimuli and different contexts play a role in why you may or may not be so turned on by your lover these days. So as a little recap, one of the things that I'd like you to think about are, what are some of the things that you really enjoyed with your lover? And like 3 things, get details. Write them down. I know for a fact that my child is on the other side of this wall. Or pretty sure anyway. So I'm not going to give you super great details about the sex with my husband, because I don't know that my child wants to hear that. So maybe another day I'll share that with you guys. But let's just say there are environments which are really fun and sexy. And sometimes there are even playful scenarios that can be a lot of fun that you can bring into your life, that every once in a while you might tap in and go, remember that time when blah, 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 and we did yada, yada, yada. And it just brings back really good laughs and memories. A lot of times you cannot recreate the same environment. You can try, but usually what's happened is it's, been 5 minutes. So, you have new stressors in your life, whether they're financial or health or relationship or whatever they happen to be. They're new stressors that have come in since the 5 or 10 minutes ago or 10 years ago that you had these great memories from. So it's not about, when you're looking back into these stories of things that you really enjoyed, it's not about recreating them exactly as they were. It's about getting the essence about what it was that you enjoyed, so that you can go, what I really enjoyed about that was the spontaneity. What I really enjoyed about that was the playfulness or whatever. So some of the environment could even be that it was the warmth, it was the colors, and internally it could be that there was like a newness. It was very exciting. So all those things can play a role, right? And when you've been with somebody 10 years, trying to have the newness you'll need to create something different in order to have that newness. So that's when things like checking out my do's, don'ts, and maybes list can come in handy, which you can also get on my website at milicajelenic.com. So milicajelenic.com. You can also get it on the Inspired Choices Network under my host page. And so under the pleasure zone, and you can get that, and you can go through some of those things and just see, like, what would you like to try? Maybe there's some new ideas on there. It's a pretty vanilla list. I kept it vanilla because it's like an entry level to understand what you like and don't like, but it might give you some ideas of things to try so that you can have some newness brought back into your life, or brought into your life. So you don't want to necessarily recreate the old, because you can't. But what you can do is you can take some of the essence of those things and bring it forward. So playfulness, for example, might be part of it. Part of it might be exploration. I'm just coming up with, I'm trying to like just summarize for me what they would be. And then scenarios of sex that I didn't like might be something like lack of connection, rushed, blah, 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 blah. So there might be some other things to talk about, or it could be like fear of being caught or something like that. So it could be anything like that. Could also be like, just like, if I look really far back, it was like disconnection from myself. But you can go with what you liked with the partner that you're with, but you can also go with what you liked in general, like if you want to get a summary in general of your life. But when you're trying to do this with a partner, try and stick with your own partner so that you know and remember what it is that you liked with them. And then when you're looking back on what you didn't like, you might not have any times that you didn't necessarily not like sex with your partner, but you just might have had some blah moments or some super stresses going on where you weren't turned on. So it might not have been bad sex, it just might have been lack of interest. So you can look at that. You might have had bad sex in the past, so you can write down what it was in detail about what was bad about that, for sure. Because that stuff could still be lingering too. If it was really bad and it was like abusive, then that stuff could still be haunting you to this day, where it would be having your body run trauma scenarios all the time, which is something that in order to move into the future and have more pleasure, you need to get those things out of your body. Otherwise, it's like being in that super loud environment of like noises and lights flashing and things going off where you're constantly being bombarded. Trauma is like that, but it's internal. It's like an internal bombardment. So until your body can release that, and there's lots of different methods on changing that and releasing it. Different breathing methods, movement methods, mind methods as well, like mindset methods. So homeopathics, there's many different ways to start to shift out traumas, and it's necessary in order to move forward. So if you have had traumas, then definitely that needs to be healed in order for you to move forward. And it might not even be that it has to do with your current lover. It could be old stuff that's coming up to be healed, and they might have triggered it. They might have touched you in some way that reminded you of some time when some pervert decided that they were going to molest you, and then your body remembers that, and all it can do now is have that memory connected to your partner now because they touched you in the same way. So bodies have crazy memory, and even if you don't remember it consciously, it can sometimes get triggered. So it needs to be brought up and healed. And if you need assistance with that, if you need to understand how to let that go, hope you'll connect with me or connect with somebody else that you feel comfortable with if it's not me, so that you can move forward in life. And in order to connect with me, find me through milicajelenic.com. That's milicajelenic.com. The chances are you actually love your lover because you're still there, but you just need to have your brain stimulated differently.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.